Hey everybody, Chris Lyford here again at the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium on Creativity Day. Thanks for joining us once again. I'm here with Chris Willard. Chris, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Having a great time.
Yeah, great. So Chris is a mindfulness specialist. He's the author of Growing Up Mindful and the new book, Alpha Breaths. Chris, can you tell me a little bit about your work with kids and adults? What's the difference when you're using mindfulness with somebody who's younger versus somebody older?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we all have this sense of what mindfulness is really sort of supposed to look like. With adults, we're still, we're quiet, we're focused on our breath. And with kids, I think we just have to open up that definition a little bit. Right? We know their attention spans are smaller, their bodies are smaller, all of that. We want to make it fun, we want to make it playful, we want to make it creative. So what I often think about is that there's a study by a wonderful child development researcher named Lev Vygotsky. 60, 70 years ago, he did this thing where he was trying to get 7 or 8 year olds to stand still, which you can probably imagine about how well that went, right? So the kids are running around all over the place. He pulls them back and he says, I want you to stand still again, but this time imagine that you're the guard at a factory or a knight guarding a castle. And of course, what we know would happen, of course, is these kids are now able to really stand still. Because we make it fun, we make it a game, we make it playful, and then kids are engaged, they're involved. And so that to me is how we start thinking about mindfulness with kids. And maybe it starts more playful, and then over time, these practices can grow with them. So that as they get older, right, then they learn how to really be still, and maybe they do focus on their breath, and it does look more like grown-up mindfulness. Mm-hmm. But even with my own son, who's 4 years old, I mean, we do some funny breathing practices. We do some just awareness practices, and kids can get into that stuff, again, when we make it fun. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. And now, does it work faster with kids, slower with kids? Are we seeing the same things? We talk a lot about how mindfulness affects the body, the brain, physiology.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, are there any differences in that respect?
So we know that kids' brains are more plastic. Mm-hmm. That means that they are more malleable and they can change more, and that's how difficult pathologies develop in kids, right? Mm-hmm. But it also means that there's enormous potential in terms of how kids' brains develop. So we can teach them mindfulness at this young age, and we can really see over time the way different parts of the brain start to grow and activate and prune themselves and grow up healthier, more integrated, more robust, resilient brains that can manage the stresses that of course we all know our kids are going to face. And so that I think is really exciting. There's more and more research on this. Some studies are coming out that haven't even been published yet, but about actual brain changes when you look at kids in an MRI, seeing which parts of the brain are developing more and less as you're teaching them mindfulness. And that to me is just so exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What advice would you give a therapist who's interested in entering this kind of work? Maybe they're new to working with kids or new to mindfulness.
Yeah. I think in a lot of ways for a therapist coming at this, we want to think about how do we, I think the question a lot of therapists have in general about mindfulness is, how do we do this thing, right? How do I introduce this in a session, right? It feels a little bit unnatural, like, hey, we're going to sit down and do this now. So with kids, how do we make it a game? Kids are probably going to be a little bit more cooperative in many ways and less skeptical and open to stuff. So it's about thinking, a few of my favorite practices, something like, with kids, the cooling off breath or the hot chocolate breath, which is just holding our hands up like this. And if you imagine you've got a cup of hot chocolate or something like that, it's really full to the top, right? You can just breathe in, smelling it. And just gently blowing out, cooling off. And a few things like this, right? So it becomes like, let's do a couple hot chocolate breaths at the start of the session. Right, we're playing, I do some things with kids, like we play Jenga a lot in therapy. Some therapists will write down questions on the Jenga block. So I'll write down mindfulness practices. We pull out a block, do 3 hot chocolate breaths, do an alligator breath, notice 3 sensations in your feet. So it's naturally kind of built into the session, what we're already doing. And then just other things like, one of the kind of challenges of mindfulness, I think why it's so popular, is the competition for attention that we have, especially with our screens, our devices all the time, right? The good news about having a device like that, a phone in our pocket all the time, we also all have a portable recording device all the time. So with older kids, with teenagers who I work with, they'll come in for a session, we'll maybe do a little practice at the beginning to settle in. Then we'll talk and do a little cognitive work or a little talk therapy, whatever it might be that they need. At the end, maybe do a longer practice. I get out my phone or they get out their phone, hit record, and guide them in that longer practice, and then I can just text it to them, email it to them.
Oh, that's great.
And they have that, it's like mindfulness to go.
Yeah,
and it's my voice, which is like this, virtual transitional object they can go home with and feel like it's custom made for them.
Yeah.
And that helps keep the practice going, not just in the session, but between sessions. And so that's another fun way to start to help kids integrate into their lives.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Everybody out there,
thank
please
you.
check back in with us. We'll be doing these all weekend. Hope to see you soon.